Episode 25 of Politically Conscious returns this Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. 100 days in, is America satisfied with Trump? His approval sits at 41%, but only 7% of Democrats agree. And with 92% negative media coverage, the nation is asking who's telling the truth. Political experts Emille Bryant and Leo Smith break it all down. If you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. What's up, everybody? It's episode 25 of Politically Conscious as I get my political experts in here for, if you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. We're going to get right to it. I got a lot of clips today. So I'll quickly introduce y'all to Emille Bryant, my ride or die co-host here, coming from the left side of things. I got my brother Leo Smith coming from the right side of things, and I try to moderate this from an independent standpoint. So hopefully you get all three perspectives as we try to get to the actual factual. Emille, as usual, just a very quick, brief intro so we can get this thing started. Same thing for you, a little quick intro, and then we're going to get into Trump's 100 days, play a lot of political cuts from other people, and give our reactions. That's what we do every week when we pop up. Emille, tell them who you are, brother.
Emille Bryant. I am a political consultant, author, speaker, and I am also a co-host on one of the dopest podcasts in America. That is this one right here. I ask my candidates who I have helped at the congressional level and advise people who are running for Senate, for Congress, for state and local races. I advise them all the time, tell the truth, tell it early, tell it often, because bad news does not get better with time.
Leo, tell them who you are.
I'm Leo Smith, former Republican National Committee strategist and former GOP political executive with the state party. My work includes leading my political strategy company, Engaged Futures, where I do government relations, public affairs, and engagement. And just a local business guy who is trying to make sure that we conserve what is good and true and that we get rid of what is ineffective.
I love it. And so I will say this for any of our regulars end up catching the show after the fact. Forgive me for the scheduling, so y'all didn't get the prompt that y'all normally get. We just let people know that this is literally a pop-up. It just posted on YouTube. So forgive us if y'all find this show later down the line and didn't get the notice. But we're going to play a quick cut. Again, we react to different cuts around the media. And so this one is just a quick, just very quick and brief. And I'm going to play two cuts back to back. One highlighting Trump giving his notice for his 100 days with his speech in Michigan, and then we'll go into a cut talking about his grades. Matter of fact, what I'm going to do, let me do this. Let me play this very brief cut. Let me hear both of your grades just without any more information, like from A to F. So A to F. Think about that as you hear this cut. I want to get y'all take, and then we'll get into some cuts. So let me play this cut. This is a very brief cut real quick. Let me play this.
We're here tonight in the heartland of our nation to celebrate the most successful first 100 days of any administration in the history of our country, and that's according to many, many people.
Hey, that's how he opened. No surprise. Typical Trump, if you will, right or wrong. Emille, we'll start with you. What is your grade of his first 100 days before we even play any cuts? I just want to hear what y'all are thinking before I show you any information.
F-.
Wow, I didn't even know you could go that low.
Yeah, I made it up because I'm tired of seeing the Constitution violated. If I gave him any marks for anything, it would be negated by the fact that he's violated the Constitution repeatedly for the past 100 days. So it doesn't matter until he complies with his responsibility under his oath to preserve, protect, and uphold the Constitution. It doesn't matter.
F- for you coming from the left. All right, Leo, brother, coming from the right. What's your grade for this brother?
This is going to be a great conversation because Emille and I probably have some different opinions on this. I'm moved to give him a pre-grade that relates to me saying that Hollywood, that politics is Hollywood for ugly people. So first I'm going to give him his entertainment grade, which is what the new politician does. They entertain. And that grade is, I'm going to give him a B, for being entertaining. But I'm going to do better than Emille on the overall grade that you've asked me in all seriousness. I'm going to give him a C. And that's going to be an interesting discussion.
Absolutely. I was coming into this thing with C-, But with one of these latest acts, executive orders by I moved it to a D. I was coming in at C minus, but I've moved it to a D for probably some of the same reason Emille gives him an F minus, as he said he made that up. All right, let's give just a couple of little grades from some other people. This is from the BC, and then I'm going to talk about what they've graded him on some of his campaign promises and how he's done. So I'll share that information and get y'all take. But let's start with this cut from BBC.
Start firstly with the price of petrol, which was something that was mentioned by Mr. Trump.
So tackling inflation was a key issue in the campaign, and it's a key issue for the administration in their first 100 days. And specifically on the price of gasoline in the US, so petrol, President Trump said this last night.
So gasoline prices are down by a lot. We just hit $1.98 in a lot of states. Think of it.
So both of those things are not accurate. So the price of gasoline from the day that Trump entered office to this week has actually ticked up slightly, according to the American Automobile Association, which tracks this sort of thing. On the 20th of January, the day that Trump entered office, the average gas price, regular gas price in the US was $3.13, around about that. And this week it stands at $3.16. So not up massively, ticked up slightly, but certainly not way down, as Trump said in that clip. And he also made a very specific claim about gas prices in certain states. And he said they're down to $1.98 in a lot of states. And the same association which tracks gas prices across the US also breaks it down state by state. And there's no evidence that any state has an average gas price that low. The lowest state is Mississippi. In Mississippi, the average gas price at the moment this week is $2.67. So a fair bit off that $1.98 that Trump quoted in his rally last night.
What about immigration?
On immigration, obviously another major campaign issue and an issue for the administration. And on his record on immigration in his first 3 months in office, President Trump said this last night.
We've set all-time records for the lowest number of illegal border crossings ever recorded. Think of that, ever recorded.
Is that true?
Now, that is backed up by US Border Patrol statistics. So last month in March, as well as in February, the first 2 full months Trump was in office, immigration numbers have reached record lows. We have a graphic we can show you of that. That's actually a graphic to do with Doge, but we do have an immigration chart which shows the level of immigration in March, the amount of encounters crossing the US border. Hit 7,000, just over 7,000 migrants crossed the US border and were encountered by Border Patrol. So that is the lowest on record since monthly records began in 2000. Compared to the Biden administration, for context, the monthly totals in March last year were around 140,000, so a significant drop. Trump said it was the lowest ever. Migration policy think tanks which track these sort of things say that it certainly is the lowest since records began on monthly.
So before I get into some other things, I start with those two. Just want to get y'all initial reaction. Leo, we'll start with you. I think again, you kind of see that dichotomy. He's hit on some things, obviously missed on another. Is kind of what I just wanted to show initially. But what are your thoughts about the two things that were mentioned by BBC?
Well, there you go with that $198 in gas. Tell me where that is. Maybe it's worth the trip. Yeah, but that's the performance piece, right? And so, but when it comes to actual governance, things that really matter and are true, that's why there I would give him a failing grade. I mean, that's a lie, and it's a D. I mean, because he's lying. And the fact is that gas prices have not gone. Now, he could have used, or someone could have pulled out, I don't know, from that speech, he may have mentioned eggs, right? Eggs prices have gone down. No, that's not something that drives an economy per se, but there could have been other, sort of anecdotal evidence that Trump could have thrown out. But for him to not even really think to pull something out in messaging that would actually be true, that's just a flaw in him as a performer. This is why celebrities should not, become presidents necessarily. We can talk about that more later. But on the immigration issue, boom, I'm glad the guy fessed up. Sometimes we think that, folks on media are against conservative leadership all the time. He acknowledged, and I think I hear a lot of Democrats also acknowledging that Trump really deserves an A on immigration.
Fair enough. Emille, your thoughts on those two issues? We're going to go into some more, but just wanted to let you respond to the clip first.
I love that Leo loves the performance piece. I agree that it is a performance. I also agree that it's an awful performance because he's lying to the American people who did not hire him to lie or to perform for them. He was hired to do a job, and in one respect, he has done it. He has delivered on the promise. He said he would cut the illegal immigration and the border crossings are down by 95% year over year. That's an amazing statistic. How he got there, however, that's where the problem lies. So where I would give him an A for the raw number, I give him a D for how he achieved it. So overall grade for that particular part of his work, in my opinion, it's a solid C.
Now, fair enough. I'll throw in just real quick because I understand exactly. We already had some dialogue about how some of the deportations and things of that nature have happened. I'll just say, this is just personal context to listening to both of you. Emille, I'll just highlight definitely concerned with the how. Obviously, start get into the violations of the Constitution. I will say that significant increase, some of that comes with the territory. I'm not okaying it, but when you have such a significant increase, and it's a lot of, it's just unfortunately the reality when you make a drastic change that there are going to be some of those mistakes made. And at the end of the day, it's his initiative, so it'll be kind of land in his lap whether something goes wrong. But some of that is just at the border. Some of those mistakes are being made. Again, I'm just trying to give context. I'm not siding with anything, but I understand. I'm just highlighting that that's some of it. Leo go first, and then go back to Emille.
As host, Montoya, I think it's great that you don't side, but I'm going to side a little bit here because the fact is that yes, we're looking at the outcome, and both Emille and I are agreeing, and that he gets an A on the pure outcome, not looking at his means to the end. Okay, but however, when we critique Donald Trump on the outcome, having no evidence that anybody else has ever had the same outcome, right? That we don't have any other proof of concept or methodology that we know works. And that is the challenge with the Dems and progressives who think about, there's got to be a certain amount of care and bedside manner as we lead in government and make a change. Well,
we lost your volume real quick, Leo. Your volume might have just dropped out. I don't know if there's anything you can do on your end. Yeah, maybe something pop out. We can barely hear you. We just lost your volume. Might have to have you come out and come in. Might be just some type of technical difficulty.
Okay, I'm gonna change my audio setting.
Okay. We can barely hear you. So just letting you know we can hear you, but barely. It just changed all of a sudden. All right.
I'm gonna change my audio setting if you don't mind. Okay.
Okay, go ahead. All right, Emille, go ahead and jump in because
sure.
Go ahead, jump in.
For sure.
Jump in.
The thing about this is, and this is dogged the immigration system for the past, probably since Reagan, who did amnesty, right? That was about 40 years ago, right? And people were actually up in arms, but not as bad as they would have been today. Amnesty is a big deal. But what matters here is that due process is the rule of the law, is the law of the land. It's the Fifth Amendment. It's the very important part of what we do in America, which is why we are somewhat of a standout nation in many people's eyes, because we're not at the whim of an individual. So getting it done is important, but also how you do it is just as important. And that's where I feel we're not really giving the appropriate attention to, should we be doing it this way? Because we're setting precedents for other people not named Trump to do something just as bad or worse that might not be what we intend as a nation.
Nah, fair enough. Leo, let's see if you can hear you now. We just want to see if we can hear you.
How's this? How's my audio?
Yeah, you're good. Yeah.
Okay, great. But look, to continue on that, and I agree with Emille, due process is important. We're talking about the issue of deporting someone. Now, it is debatable as to whether or not the gentleman, Broligarchs, had due process. Meaning he's been in court many times. The question is that the United States government under Trump admitted that they mistakenly deported him to the wrong country. But even Americans say that we want, when polled, even Democrats say we want him to come back here, have a hearing, and then be deported elsewhere. And so they agree he should have been deported. So let's be clear about this. So the question is the due process that he didn't get it was the issue of Trump did not honor a previous court decision not to return him to El Salvador. We need to be clear about that. So now let's talk about that. We have to understand the modality that Trump is in, and that modality is so many things have been unconstitutionally done by previous presidents, meaning we all know that Biden intentionally did not prosecute a lot of illegal border crossings. Right. It was open about that. So Trump, we gotta acknowledge that what Trump is doing is saying, look, I'm correcting unconstitutionality in a way that provides public safety to Americans and further upholds the standard, the values that we have. And that's why Americans are rating him in polling high on the border issue. Because the fact is that, yeah, it's a heart tugger and a good news piece, this Alberto Garcia thing, but it's a losing message for the Democrats because the fact is Americans on whole, if they had the choice of deporting him or keeping him, they would say deport him.
I just don't agree. I don't think the facts indicate that Americans agree that he should have been deported simply because of procedure. The courts had very clearly said that he was not supposed to be deported, that he had other things pending that would have indicated something other than an immediate deportation had the courts continued down the path they were going. Had he gotten his due process, there's no indicator that that's what would have happened. But further, Americans do care about the due process. They do care about getting it right in the courts because that's the check function for the executive. Otherwise, you end up with people being deported who have no business being on airplanes. And
so let me cut in real quick, Emille, real quick, because I want to make sure that your response is to what I think I heard Leo say. So I don't think there's a disagreement on the due process. You're kind of leaning into that for what you were just saying. What I think Leo is highlighting from a political strategy standpoint, he thinks strategically all the time. I think what he's highlighting is due to the kind of what he said, to the unconstitutionality that Biden provided, that some of this is because of what Americans actually want when it comes to immigration, that some of what he's doing, there's almost an allowance for some of, I'm not saying he's not talking about right or wrong. He's just talking about the messaging for how do you handle it if most Americans are saying we want this issue handled, and if he's handling it without following some of the Constitution when it's up against what previous administration has done, it's kind of made for this allowance. So it's not. So his argument is not that Americans don't want due process. He's just kind of saying what it's up against, and I think it's at least a fair thought. And I don't know how the left should message that, considering that that's part of the reality. I think
this is a governing question. I appreciate that. Let me say this in 10 seconds. So the question then becomes, how do you do it? See, and everybody agrees that he's got a good outcome. But here's what the left is proposing. And this is the challenge of even giving him due process. So what do you say? Let's say he's sent out 2 million undocumented people who were not naturalized citizens or born citizens of America. If he sends out 2 million people, how do you do due process for 2 million people who broke a law? You can't do that in any one administration. He has to do that with a sweep.
I want to be 100% transparent about this, though. There was a bill that passed the House that was in the Senate that Trump squashed that would have expedited this. Now, what Congress can do is create expedited procedures. They've done this before. This is not new. There was an immigration bill in 1983. There was another one in 1986. There was another one in the 90s. I think the last one was in 1994. There are ways to get this done. Due process doesn't mean a traditional slow court system. It just means a process by which a person accused of a crime can face their accuser and defend themselves. Sometimes it's very procedural, and there are immigration courts and immigration judges who expedite the process. It doesn't matter if it's 2 million. What matters is that we say we're a nation of laws, therefore we honor them. Going back to your point about Biden going unconstitutional, I would say this. The same leeway every president has used to bend the Constitution or the law, and I'm going to go with the law versus Constitution in this case, has been what Trump, the difference here is Trump's not bending the law. He's being very blatant. He's putting people out of the country who have a right to a due process. All of the other presidents before, they would ride the line as to what part of the law they were going to either enforce or use. But this one is very clear. Almost all of the people they were deporting in previous administrations followed some due process in some way, shape, or form.
All right, let me jump to another cut. I'm gonna end this with, I don't know how realistic it is, Emille, when the number was 140,000 per month and it's down to 7,000. So if we've done it to the point where we've allowed too many in, there was no process before.
You can't violate the law.
I understand your stance. I'm not expecting you to change your stance because I understand you're stuck. And I'm just highlighting that I respect that the law is the thing that matters for you. I'm just talking about, in my opinion, being realistic with a country.
My last point. I agree with you that it's a hard check.
I gotta go to a cut. I'm just talking about being realistic with a country of our size, or 30 years ago when we wasn't having as many crossings. Maybe that's easy. But at the point that we open up the floodgates, I just don't know how realistic it is. That's all I'm saying. All right, let's play this cut right here. And this is from our brother Shelly. Who did you get to catch Shelly at the did y'all catch each other up in the DC last week? Just catch him.
I didn't catch him.
Emille was supposed to meet him. I was wondering if they caught each other. All right, this is from him talking about the 100 days as well.
100 days. All the numbers are in. Economic output is shrinking. Economy is contracting. Yes. Okay. So let's be clear. This is this quarter would be the last couple days of the Biden administration, right? And then Trump's administration, right? So you can't blame all of it on Biden. I can't blame all of it on Biden. Both administrations have a lot to do with this. Stock market is up and down. Consumer confidence is lowest level since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Consumer confidence is very big because that's the consumer confidence is what drives your spending. If you're confident in the economy, you spend more. If you're not, you spend less. It's just that simple. That's why it's an important barometer of the vitality of the economy. So the economy is not going well. Trump supporters are not going anywhere. Frank Luntz was on CNN and he said last night that he's never seen anything like this. With the economy and everything going on, Trump voters are sticking with him. Now, we've seen this before. This should be no surprise to people. Shouldn't be any surprise. We've been through worse. Honestly, we've been through impeachments. We've been through trials. We've been through charges. We've been through guilty verdicts. I mean, we've been through assassination attempts. We've been through a lot. So it shouldn't surprise anybody that we're not going anywhere. We're sticking by our guy. But what we need to do as voters for Donald Trump is be honest with ourselves. Like, we don't have to be honest with others, but we at least have to be honest with ourselves. We are feeling a tough economy right now. And we can't blame the liberals. We can't blame the media. We are feeling it. Let's be honest with ourselves at least. I know I'm feeling it. Gas is low. Yes, I'm happy gas is low. But other things have increased, and I'm feeling it. It's tight. It's tight out there. I'm seeing it, and I'm feeling it. And I can be honest about that without saying, oh, I'm mad at my vote or I'm mad at Donald Trump. No, I'm feeling the economy shift. I'm sensing it. I'm feeling it. I'm seeing it in my personal life. Let's be honest with ourselves because honesty is important, at least to yourself.
So I don't know if Emille, I'll start with you. I don't know if that's Shelly holding his side to the fire, as you said you thought he would on previous shows.
I love it.
He's just speaking to his personal reality and sharing, hey, he's still with Trump. It's still his guy, but he's speaking to the reality of the economy. And I always highlight, and we've talked about this in the very early shows, that one of the best entertainment jobs. When Leo says he gives Trump an A as far as being an entertainer, I've always talked about how he pulled the wool over the Americans' eyes when it comes to the economy. Like we had a great economy actually, but that's not what people thought as of the end of last year. And I even saw a post that I never shared on here that highlighted he was inheriting one of the best economies ever, and it's tanked in the last couple of months. And obviously, we think tariffs is part of the reason. So just wanted to throw that context. But yeah, Emille, any thoughts to what Shelley had to say? And I do want to get into some of the other things that he promised on the campaign as well. But go ahead and respond to that first.
You know, if you want to rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic, feel free. But the president put sugar in the gas tank, and the engine of the economy is sputtering because of it. It is a unforced error, right? We had. You know, people said the price of eggs needs to come down. I just looked at the Fred data. Fred is the Federal Reserve Bank, right? They track the price of eggs. So you can go to the Federal Reserve Bank. It's fred.stlouis.org. You can track the price of ground beef, eggs. They're tracking it for America. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe the president. Go get the data for yourself. That's what we talk about on here. And I'm telling you, all those numbers are up from last year. They're up from December. So when we talk about this, we're saying very clearly there's a problem. If you think that your guy is going to fix it, he's the one that broke it. I don't understand why that logic says I should vote for a guy that broke something that was working fairly well prior to him coming into office.
No, good stuff. Leo, I'll challenge you real quick. I personally brought up the word tariffs because I think people are pushing that. Part of the reason we're seeing this is because of the tariff policy. I'm not saying that's all that's causing it, but I know you were on a previous show saying you might be a fan of some of what Trump is doing with the tariffs, and it's still kind of yet to be seen when it comes to whatever it ends up being, right? Because we're in the middle of the uncertainty. I know you've acknowledged that, but just curious, what are your thoughts as Shelley says, hey, I'm still a MAGA guy, but I am getting pinched here. Your thoughts with what's happening for Americans in the 100-day grade?
Well, the fact that Shelley co-signed, and I like Shelley's willingness to be fair and analytical, but he co-signed on this idea that gas is lower, which is ridiculously not true. So he just followed that without actually doing the reality. But the issue of the eggs, of course, I mean, I have the actual experience that eggs that I buy, which I'm a big egg eater, I have choices now that are much lower, and I am seeing that, and that's how Americans work. Yes, we like data and polls, but we mostly go by what we're personally experiencing. And certainly Shelley is right, and I agree that Trump is creating an unforced error, not necessarily in the initial strategy that we need to do tariffs. I think most people agree with that. Other Democratic presidents have done that. Obama's done it. Others have done it. It is a good strategy of making sure that global market forces aren't taking advantage of our country. However, the way that Trump is up and down, and I mean, I don't even know, I'm a small serial entrepreneur, and I don't even know what to do in some of my business that I do. I mean, so can you imagine what Amazon and other steel makers are trying to figure out, the auto industry, and Trump keeps going back and forth. This is no way to run a company and to build confidence. Trump used to rely a lot on how he impacted Wall Street. He impacted the manufacturing industry, the makers, the creators of American productivity. But we're looking at a GDP that's shrinking, that's small. He is failing horribly.
Respect. Let me see. We got some comments here. Let me share this comment. Okay, I got one person that just says it's just sad. Let me tell y'all, show you. These are some things that Politico just kind of pointed out for some of his campaign promises and where we're at currently at the 100-day mark. And matter of fact, versus me giving the context, because I'm about to put you on the spot, but this is what you do. Just to highlight, I'm pretty sure people have heard it with all the stuff that's in the media, but why do we even measure at the 100-day mark? And just from a historical standpoint, just to add that to, for those that may not know.
It goes back to FDR, believe it or not. So you go back to when the president came in, FDR came in 1933, America was deep in the Depression. And so he came in and he told Congress, I need you to pass a bunch of bills And all of those jump started the economy. That was the New Deal. It was the Civilian Conservation Corps. It was the Works Progress Administration. It was all of these things. And he jumped in it and he said, measure me by 100 days of progress. And he was giving people a countdown so that they could have some hope. And that's why we have since then this 100-day countdown every administration because of what FDR did.
Absolutely. Just want to get that context for somebody who may not have heard it. And so, according to Politico, they share most set of his most notable promises. They found that he kept 9 of his pledges and broke 4. So I'll highlight before I even go into some of those. Whereas, Trump says, not Trump, but when Shelley says, hey, we're sticking with our guy, and we've talked about that constantly on this show, that there are still set deliverables despite, for example, his current rating is at 44%, which is 1% lower than his first term, and he's the lowest in 70 years as far as how the president is rated at the 100-day mark. So just highlighting where he kind of sits generally. He's also rated pretty low, but when I broke that down, found that 88% of those who identify as Republicans are happy with what he's being done. The Democrats are at 7%. So it's definitely a huge dichotomy, and independents are sitting around at 38%. So you see, again, over the last 80 years, he's the lowest rated at the 100-day mark out of the last 80 years, just kind of highlighting that as well. But on some of his promises that they say that he kept, transparency. He said he would disclose who funded his presidential transition. That was a broken promise. On trade, enact tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China on day 1. He has promised and kept that promise. Blanket tariffs up to 20%, 60% on Chinese goods. So another promise that he kept. Create Internal Revenue Service to collect tariffs. That's still to be determined. Said he promised the largest tax cut. Again, these are all campaign promises. That's still to be determined. Economy and markets, end inflation, and make America affordable again. Obviously, it's low right now, but technically, we're only 100 days in, so that's still to be determined. Let's see a couple of other ones. Close the education department. That's still to be determined. The executive order has been put in, but as we've explained on this show, the legal process to end it has not taken place. A couple of other ones that he kept: ban transgender athletes. He's kept that. He's also kept the crypto promise to end federal government crackdown on cryptocurrency firms and investors. That's another one that he kept. Also promised to pardon the January 6th rioters. So that was another one that he kept. And let me see, one that was broken to end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. If you remember, he was making that promise prior to get elected. So that's one that he broke. So there's other ones as well, but just wanted to share several of them. Leo, I'll start with you. How has Trump held up as someone who has kept his promises, which is often what we as the people are always concerned? Politicians say a lot, but are we able to actually hold them accountable? And has he at least been accountable to his base from what you can tell is, I guess, the question I'll ask you, Leo.
So the political wants get into the weeds, and those elements that you just went over about his promises. Most Americans were not drilled down as much on those things. Where the Americans drilled down on the border, probably 60% of the voters were concerned about what was happening on the border. And the border is more secure. Where where Americans concerned about the issue in Gaza and between Palestinians and Israel, yes, they were concerned about it. And Trump is now having surrogates from people who are hostages now come on and support him. People who didn't even support him in his candidacy are now showing support for him. So they see that. That's a heartfelt thing, this border safety issues, he's rescuing other Americans. That means a lot. The food and gas prices, that's not doing well for him. But he's also been clarity about another cultural issue. He's giving clarity about gender's impact on sports, fairness and protection of women and girls' sports. He's been clear on it. That's a big cultural thing that sticks out there and rests on everybody's minds and hearts. Okay, so he's winning on some of these cultural issues in a way that's really powerful, including this whole nonsense about DEI and the opposition, meaning Democrats, their response to the whole DEI thing. I wish we could do a one show, Montoya,
Right.
on DEI, because Emille and I know so much, and all of us know so much more about DEI, its reason for being, and how to talk about it, and the problems of it, than almost any of these Hakeem Jeffries and Congressional Black Caucus people. Who it shames me to see them trying to defend DEI with bad information.
Bad information.
Now, I want to say this though. Numbers you just went over, okay? Here's what CNN, and I love going, as a conservative, I love going to a CNN a progressive liberal media source. Okay, CNN pointed out that in their polling that they released today, that if Harris was able to just take over the presidency, Americans across partisanship still feel that Trump should win by 2 points over Harris, even with what they know about Trump today.
Wow.
You know, the Schumer has a 17% approval rating from Democrats.
Wow.
Hakeem Jeffries has a 20% approval rating from Democrats. Okay, so the problem is, and I sent a Democrat legislator this morning a note saying, I love seeing your moral clarity about legal issues for America, because Democrats are not clear in their strong leadership. So much so that with all these problems that Trump is demonstrating, Americans still feel that Democrats are not presenting the right kind of leadership and ideas on governance that would give them confidence in Democrats. And that's a travesty. That's a number that Trump wins on.
Yeah, I actually saw, just Emille definitely jump in right here, but I actually saw that a headline that says he's effectively destroyed the Democrats as a marker of his 100 days. Within 100 days,
that's one of those things.
Sorry, they marked that as a marker, and I can't disagree. And I'm just calling it what it is, and that's what we're here for. Emille, your thoughts to some of what I say were political, or just respond to Leo, whatever makes sense.
Yeah, the Democrats destroyed themselves after 2016. Let's be very clear. It was Trump just sort of dug the knife in deeper, but in Japan they call it seppuku, where it's a ritual self killing. And to me, the Democrats sort of fell for all of the bait that Trump put out there, because he was fighting a cultural war. And the problem with the culture war is that everybody loses if you don't redefine it quickly. They didn't redefine it quickly. And what we're seeing today in this 100-day period is the result of that from 10 years ago, which is that the Democrats do not know how to frame any cultural argument. They really do not have a good understanding of how to frame cultural arguments. What Trump does is Trump understands, whether he's connected to it or not, he understands the pulse of the man on the street, and he speaks to that. That pulse can be savage, it can be populist, it can be draconian, it could be football, it could be 4th of July fireworks, but he gets it. And unfortunately, the Democrats have not figured out how to message against that simplistic, sometimes overly simplistic, often far too black and white, but clearly resonant message with the American people.
Yeah, and I would highlight the reason they haven't figured it out is because the actual elite, this is not just my opinion, but actually the elite in the party don't know how, because they're faking who they are. They're absolutely faking who they are. And when we as the African American community sometimes look at, in a sense, the Republicans or the Democrats, is like when we say, oh, it's two heads of the same bird. I don't necessarily personally subscribe to that. But when it comes to the actual elite, I actually might subscribe to that. And the reason I say I don't subscribe to that is because I do feel like there are, whether it's liberal or conservative issues, that Americans literally are at each other's throats, or really, and they're really fighting from a legal standpoint or from a political standpoint. So I don't think those opposites exist if it's all of the same bird. So that's why I personally don't subscribe to that. But when it comes to the elite, I absolutely think they can't message because they don't want to reveal who they are. That's just a thought.
Well, I agree. And if you go back probably to Jimmy Carter, you would see that Jimmy Carter was probably the last clearly not elite messaging Democrat. And then you got Barack Obama. Barack Obama never tried not to be an elite. He was what he was. He made himself so charismatic, it was easy for people to follow along. Bill Clinton is somewhere in the middle, right? He could often present as an elite. He could also present as someone who could be, more folksy and more homey. But the problem is that since then, if you go look at the Democrats' fundraising, unlike the Republicans who said, we'll take all your corporate money and we don't really care who else's money we get, the Democrats have been trying to ride this line between what they get from Wall Street and what they get from Main Street. And they try to message one, we're Main Street folks, and then they tell Wall Street, oh, by the way, your dollar's good over here. You're going to have to pick a side. And they haven't done that for the last 30 years.
And I want to be fair because, having worked for the Republican National Committee, having worked for Georgia GOP, I've been involved in the head shops with the McCollin 12, and I've been on the ground with folks down at the gun club, okay, with my boots on, talking to regular Georgians, okay? I've been with both. And yes, just like Rex and Scarlett manipulated this idea that, Southerners are romantic and they're doing something for the poor white man. GOP elites exist too, and they're hard and heavy. Here's what they're good at. They're better at the messaging. They're better at the sale job. And they do know that they have to at least deliver something that's important to their grassroots base. What I've learned, having now seen behind the curtains on the Democrat side in some campaign strategy, I'm not revealing anything. I'm not saying that I worked on the Democrat campaign, but I'm saying I've seen behind the curtain. And what you see there is a strata of elitism that has no regard for the grassroots. Because if they did, they would have a Southern strategy for Black people. And they don't, because they don't have a regard for them truly. If they did have some at least ability to show that they have real concerns about the American base, then they wouldn't be confused about, should we care more about American citizens versus people who aren't citizens? If they did have the ability to show concern for the grassroots folks, you wouldn't have had in the last Harris campaign, you wouldn't have had, I'm sorry, this might be me, but literally many of their staff leadership that came to work on the Harris campaign were young white people from states like Vermont, came into Atlanta, Georgia to boss the Nikema Williamses, the Black leaders, the Theron Johnson, all these elite Black superstar leaders.
Up and coming,
and were ruled by a little she was probably not out her 20s, disheveled white girl from Vermont. I saw that. And that's how much the elite care about, and the Democrats, about their people. Republicans don't make such obvious mistakes. They make sure that the white working class person sees white working class people fighting.
No, it makes sense. You wouldn't see what we talked about a few weeks ago, the walkout here in Georgia, if they were more on point. You wouldn't see Democrats in Washington drinking diet. And y'all know how much I detest RFK being the health bar. I detest it. But to y'all point, I don't think you would see those examples. But let's get to why I personally moved it from a C- to a D as we start getting into what I think are some of the major issues with the current presidency. And, surprise, surprise.
I never thought that I would see a day where I would be rooting for a university above Donald J. Trump and his administration. But I don't recognize his administration right now. I don't recognize what's happening. I have a theory. I do. We were kicking around some theories earlier, me and the team, and we were going, how could Trump be such a free speech enthusiast and allowing these things to happen, going after college universities, trying to suppress speech while pretending that you're not suppressing speech, while pretending that you're fighting DEI. It's so messy. It's so obvious. Everyone knows what you're doing. People who are still trying to grift, I suppose, are not willing to challenge you on this, which is ridiculous, because when you are out of office, we are going to have to live with these consequences. Our children are going to have to grow up in this America, okay? So when you threaten our speech, it's not worth it so that we can have pom-poms and go hurrah for a couple of years, then go, okay, well, yeah, now it kind of stinks because, we're getting arrested for wrongthink. We got David Friedman. Yeah, arrest them. Arrest Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens. Get them. I love it. And if you think it's going to stop with college campuses, you're out of your mind. So you better buck up and root for Harvard University in this fight.
I'm for Harvard. Emille, I'll let you respond first.
Didn't think I would hear the day that I would agree with Candace Owens, but I do. And the reason why is because she's 100% right. See, I don't like being a policy wonk, but I see the implications of things happening beyond what feels good or what looks good in the press. And this is where Candace Owens is 100% right. It's not just about Harvard. It's about free speech. It's not just about an immigrant, illegal or not. It is about the principle of due process. It's not just about this thing that I like because, yay, my team's winning today. My team wins our way into authoritarianism really quickly if we're not paying attention to the little things that are going on. And this is one of those little things. The First Amendment says you can critique your government. You can address your government. You can get redress for your grievances from your government. And you can do so without fear that the government will holler at you, will come back at you, will retaliate against you because you spoke against your government. King George III had some rules in place for the colonists. And when you spoke out against King George III, you would go to jail. That's the America we were supposed to live in today, 250 years later. And yet we have the president of the United States saying to an institution, shut up and do what I tell you. Otherwise, you don't get money. That is a problem.
And what's interesting, Emille and Montoya, is when Candace Owens is saying that's a problem. Emille, a rational, super smart man, is saying that's the problem. He's a progressive. Conservative Leo is saying that's a major problem. I'm on Harvard's side. I'm on free speech's side. I'm on intellectual freedom side. Okay, even though I think that a lot of these Ivy universities are too, they lean too far left and they do use propaganda in their teaching. I do feel that, and that needs to be corrected. However, I'm on Harvard's side. Okay. But yet you see but the Democrats still aren't jumping on that as their major banner. Instead, they're fighting for, stuff that really isn't essential to Americans, the lives of Americans who are naturalized citizens. I'm not worried. Democrats are out there saying you should be worried about being deported as a black man. No, I'm not. I'm a black American. I'm not worried about that at all. I am worried about my ability to have free speech. Now, if you hit me with that one, I'm on your side. And yet they're not doing it. I'm 100% for Harvard, and I love what they're doing, standing up with strength. And though I think that there needs to be some debate and discussion that equalizes the playing field in universities about intellectual curiosity, etc., Harvard needs to be supported.
Leo, I'm gonna say, one, you're right. The Democrats have messaged this all wrong, but I almost to the point where I feel it's intentional now, but I'm not gonna say that, but that's how I feel. Like, it's just not, because what you just saw it's obvious to anyone who studies strategy where they could go and be very, very resonant. But the other thing that I think I'm trying to, weave my way through in all of this is, like, he attacked law firms. He's taking away the ability for law firms to sue him, and he's trying to get them to bend knees. And so what you start to see is this pattern, and this is where I get very concerned. This is my weave, right? Is I don't personally feel threatened, but I do see the potential for many of us to become political prisoners who were not otherwise considered so until this kind of action started. So you can talk about Geronimo Pratt and many of the people from the Black Panther era who were controversial, perhaps even criminal in some cases, but certainly were railroaded into prison for decades. I feel, like I said, I'm trying to weave my way through this. I feel like we're seeing the setup for that kind of potential again. And that concerns me. The thing about the right that I think people don't understand is they took full advantage of free speech when they had it. They were able to, as soon as the fairness doctrine was eliminated, boom, you saw the right wing go crazy on, first it was AM radio, then FM radio, then cable TV, and then mainstream TV. They were working their free speech. Now you get someone like Trump in charge, and you're wondering, will the left have the same kind of leeway that the right had when the Fairness Doctrine was removed? I'm not 100% confident that's true.
Well, I chuckle because they won't, because because the thing that the left is fighting for is diffuse, is wide, is not specific. That's why they can't fight for the Harvard case, but they can fight for this kind of global idea that they consider humanism when it relates to the rights of a non-citizen. Okay, so that's why they can't focus on things like that. And so what the Republican Party is doing right now, that Candace Owens objects to, is something that she might have been concerned about, but now that she has some natural reasons to be more concerned about the raising of a child and what world that child's going to live in and what rights that child might have, being a parent changes you. And so where Candace might have played to this idea of white supremacy before, she's not as willing to do it anymore as a mother of a brown-skinned kid.
I love it.
Right? That's the shift that I'm seeing in Candace, having met her, having seen her before and after in the games that she used to play, Charlie Kirk and Turner Point, and she's unwilling to pay that now. I think being a parent makes a difference there. And we see that more and more Americans are choosing not to have children. That's why Trump is saying, I'll give you $5,000 to have a child. And so we know that fewer and fewer people have children. Right. These existential questions about what kind of world do we want to have are less important to more and more Americans. I'm not saying only listen to parents of children, but it's important. And then, so when on the right, the reason why they allowed themselves to recreate truth, right, is because they were protecting themselves from this travesty of having endorsed and benefited from slavery.
Yeah, absolutely. Is absolutely the real reason.
So they have a bigger reason. And what I always say, Brother Emille, is that one of the reasons why the left can't do equal commitment in that way is because it still is a majority white country. And there's enough white liberals whose daddy and uncles are hardcore right people who still hold some white supremacy ideas. And that's why they can't do it. So we need a creation of consciousness, but that is also grounded in a sense of American nationalism.
Leo, you hit the nail on the head, and I don't talk about this much, especially not because it's just not part of the political analysis that Montoya asked us to do, but I'll say it because you said it. There is a huge gap between what white liberals say and what they do. There's a big gap. And that big gap is being exploited continuously by the right. And that's one of their major flaws. You're going to have to align words and deeds. And what that means is, and this is something that scares a lot of people, that you're going to have to see an actual level playing field from all the children you say you believe should be equal. That actual level playing field where you begin to truly see some parity in outcomes is going to scare a lot of people who are very comfortable being liberal as long as they're on top. I don't know how that's going to change, but you're absolutely right. There's that gap, and there is being exploited because the elite on the liberal side are scared of parity.
Right. Love it. This is why we're politically conscious. This is the adeptness I prefer. Actually, again, we're just bringing a perspective I think you're not seeing out here. Here's how, again, I started out with a C- for the 100-day grade. I said I'm at a D now, but if our courts and our other two branches do not stand up to what I'm about to show, I'm going to be going F- with you, Emille. I'm just giving you a heads up for this next cut.
Did Trump just issue an executive order that would be the precursor to him invoking the Insurrection Act and martial law? Some people think so, yes. So let's go through it together calmly. The executive order is called Strengthening and Unleashing America's Law Enforcement to Pursue Criminals and Protect Innocent Citizens. And in Section 4, it calls for using national security assets for law and order. Quote, within 90 days of the date of this order, the Attorney General and Secretary of Defense, in consultation with the Secretary of Homeland Security and the heads of agencies as appropriate, shall increase the provision of excess military and national security assets in local jurisdictions to assist state and local law enforcement. Within 90 days of this order, the Secretary of Defense, in coordination with the Attorney General, shall determine how military and national security assets, training, non-lethal capabilities, and personnel can be most effectively utilized to prevent crime. This directly calls for the Secretary of Defense and military assets to be incorporated in the daily activities of local and state police departments. So I talked to a lawyer friend of mine who said, number one, the federal courts are going to challenge this right away. Okay. That's why it says in 90 days, because for the next 90 days, there's going to be people fighting this. The military turning on civilians is in the Constitution as a no-no. The next thing my lawyer friend said is that for folks in red states, it is likely going to get a little bit worse a little bit more quickly because those states are much more willing to take military assistance. But for folks in blue states, we are not out of the woods. The federal government will hold state and local jurisdictions whose officials willfully and unlawfully direct the obstruction of criminal law, including by directly and unlawfully prohibiting law enforcement officers from carrying out duties necessary for public safety and law enforcement, or unlawfully engage in discrimination or civil rights violations under the guise of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that restrict law enforcement activity or endanger citizens. Basically mumbo jumbo saying that if state or local jurisdictions don't do what the federal government wants them to in the way they want them to, they will prosecute them. Section 2.
Now let's switch over from the economy to this executive order. It's called, these are problems for me. Again, I don't regret my vote, and I'm not turning on the administration. I was just up there yesterday. But this is problematic for me because I'm a conservative. I'm a small government, non-intrusive conservative. I don't know what some of you are becoming, but I know what I am. He signed an executive order ordering federal agencies to increase the flow of military and national security equipment to local law enforcement. I don't know one conservative that should be for that. I don't know a...
Emille? Actually, it's Leo's turn.
Go ahead, Leo.
Yep, Leo.
No. I agree. This is of great concern, and I think that it is going to be shot up, to the Supreme Court for consideration. I don't think that this will go anywhere. I think that along the political playbook that Trump operates on is what Heritage Foundation and other think tanks have authored, ALEC and others, is to put out stuff and create sort of questions about the law. The whole issue of the religious public charter schools and stuff like that is part of that kind of ideology. So this issue that Americans are concerned about safety, Trump knows that he made promises about creating safety, creating and restoring law and order. I'm a law and order president. All that is part of this move. Is it dangerous? Yes. Is it something that red states are going to embrace? I disagree with that commentator. Absolutely not. There are no more militia activity in anywhere in the country more than red states, other than probably Michigan. And so red states folks really do believe in the separation of the military from the federal, from local right to bear arms and defend oneself. And I disagree with the sentiment there that there's going to be some like Southern support for this. Absolutely disagree. We'll see where this goes, but we have to be vigilant these days because Trump would love to be the strong man. He wants to be an autocrat. That's clear. And yes, we don't want him to have that sort of power.
Yeah, let me say this, and I'll go to Emille, and I'll hopefully when we get Shelley on next week, I've always said to him in his support that this area is my biggest concern because we have a very evident history, especially for our community, with over policing. There's still issues, but because that has been something that he's touted. If I'm listening to you, Leo, I think you're saying from a politically strategy standpoint, the verbiage is out there, but I think you are saying you fully expect the branches of the government to basically clear us of his desire, because you're admitting his desire is what it is, but you think the branches of government will hold up. I surely hope they do, because we've seen the results of this in the past during the drug war. Go ahead, Emille.
This to me is a major disqualifier for any of the good things he's done. This is one of those reasons why I would give him an F-. And it's very clear for me that you don't flirt with certain things. He's trying to move the Overton window. He's trying to set a anchor for the negotiation. The problem is there should never be a negotiation with posse comitatus. That's an act from 1883 that says that the standing army of the United States, the standing military of the United States, will never be used inside the borders unless there is a major declaration of war or an insurgency, which is where the Insurrection Act comes in. What this president has done repeatedly for the past 100 days is declare emergency after emergency so he can invoke certain powers that are not given to him in normal times. So we are under the state of emergency. I think there are 4 states of emergency we're in right now as a nation. Yet before he came in, the only one that might be legitimate is with immigration. But the other 3 are clearly using the powers granted by Congress to the president under an emergency so he could grab power in ways that otherwise he would not be able to use. This is problematic for every American, because if he gets what he wants, even a portion of what he wants, to your point, Montoya, we're going to see tanks and armored personnel carriers in our neighborhoods, Black neighborhoods, Latino neighborhoods. We're going to see them. And
yeah, I don't like to go to the extreme personally.
I'm not going to the extreme. Go back to the Obama administration when they were giving excess military.
Emille, what would be the justification for that? Why would we see that? What conditions?
Look, the problem is the justification doesn't matter, because all of the violent crime stats for the past 30 years have plummeted dramatically, regardless of source. You can't justify what he's trying to justify with that executive order by the numbers.
But I've seen governors like
let me cut it real quick. But what you just said, Emille, to me doesn't address the question that Leo said. So yep, the numbers are going down, and of course he's playing with the terminology. But it did take the riots to bring that out. So I think Leo's just saying, I'm asking to understand. I'm not fighting you. I want to understand here, like. So when the numbers don't do it, and in the event that somehow a riot starts, then that's obviously how it plays out. Like we know the police had all that stuff way prior. They were glad to bring it out when the riots happened, unfortunately, right? We saw it firsthand. But prior to the riots, they couldn't even bring out all the extra gear unless they were going on a drug raid and ramming somebody's house in. So we saw small examples, but it wasn't always publicized. And then the riots allowed them to bring it out. And Americans were like, damn, we didn't know y'all had gotten all this damn equipment, that type of thing. So I'm not saying Leo's right. I'm just saying, what scenario do you think they would actually bring it out? I would like to hear what you think that could be. It's obviously a hypothetical, but I do want to hear your answer to that question.
So in my opinion, where this gets really iffy is that if he can declare an emergency when things are not truly so, then it doesn't take much for him to say that someplace like Chicago is under an emergency. Even though Chicago's not that bad, and certainly not even the top 10 for murder rate in the country, you still could make the argument that someplace like that could happen. And then if you do have a natural occurring riot, which the local authorities have the capacity to manage, or the governor can call the National Guard in to help with that kind of stuff. That's the kind of moment that he can use with his masterful pen. Boom. And if Congress doesn't check him, and this is the problem with Congress, Republicans specifically, they're not giving him any oversight. They're laying down and saying what you're doing is okay. I got problems with it. I'd have a problem if it was a Democratic Congress and a Democratic president. I have problems because Congress's job is to, at very least, be the check function, even if the check is you're good to go. But to lay down and say, we're not even paying attention, which is what Congress looks like it's doing to me, that is a problem.
So Emille, I'm not going to disagree with you that if you're relying on Congress to protect you from such an act, right, where the federal government overthrows the jurisdictional authority of state and local, right? I don't know a conservative that think that that's appropriate. There is no way in heck that any conservative in Cobb County, Forsyth County, or whatever is going to say yes to that proposal. Okay, so here's what I want to make sure that we do, though, as we are very concerned about that. When we must be careful not to scare people, because the idea that they just might do it willy-nilly, right? That's really scary. Right. But you also, like you did, when you pointed out local and state authority over those things, what you just said was it's actually local and state that has more power than Congress. Bryant Kemp, as governor, has had many cases where he said, no, I'm not going to use the National Guard. No, I'm not going into the city of Atlanta. I've been part of those discussions. Right. I served on the steering committee for the new Police Foundation's new police center. We just had the grand opening 2 days ago. Okay, Brian Kemp spoke there. I am aware of when there was political pressure on Brian Kemp to usurp the authority of the city of Atlanta, a black-run city, and send in National Guard, and Brian Kemp refused to do it. Okay, in some cases, and sometimes when he was needed to do it, he did it, but he did it at the bequest of the mayor. So I know that Republican governors will push back on this in a big way. Now, what that's going to require, all of you listeners, anybody who listens to this, you better get the name and the number of your congressman and remind them that people don't want this. Because Congress, as it relates to Democratic leadership, they're absent. So if you're expecting Congress to say something, Hakeem Jefferson, Ocasio-Cortez, maybe, but the Dems have no leadership right now. And Trump is running the rest of the Republicans like a cult. So Congress is not your friend right now. You are your friend. Your neighbor is your friend. Go make sure your neighbor has the numbers of all of our congressional delegation. Make sure they know that this particular executive order is absolutely off base and Republicans need to not support it.
If politically conscious, we've been saying from day one, you have more power than you realize, and you just heard a cry for how you can be activist citizens. I was at a breast cancer event last weekend, and the Congress lady that was invited, as the guest, highlighted everyone in this room has more power than I have in my legislative role. I just am able to set up the framework for y'all to do what y'all do. I set up the framework, make sure that it's done legally. That's all I'm able to do as a legislator. Y'all are actually doing the work. That's what she said to us in the room that were able to, have those testimonies of women that had the breast saved or whatever the case may be, or no longer had cancer. She highlighted the work is still in us, in the citizens, and something that Leo and Emille, Leo especially with his Engaged Futures, is always trying to remind us as citizens what role we have. So one thing you can do versus just only going to vote when, and we do encourage vote every time, which is one of your rights, right? One of your duties, something that our community has fought hard and long for, but learn to reach out. And it's simpler to do than it was in the past. You can go on the internet and find out who that person is. You can literally engage them and say, I don't like this executive order. And they realize, hey, let me find out what the grassroots thinks. So now they even have, a lot of these congressmen actually have phone numbers you can actually call and they'll talk to you. Go ahead, Leo.
Absolutely. And I want to make sure that we understand this. That's public information, how to contact your congressman. If you don't know how to do it, get in touch with me at Leo Smith Politics. DM me on my Instagram account, Leo Smith Politics on Instagram, and I will tell you how to do it. I will tell you who your legislative leaders are locally and nationally. Okay, but here's the other thing. I have been critical of any group that calls themselves politically for the people that doesn't actually facilitate the people's power. And so one of those groups that I've been critical of because of the dire need that Black Americans have is the Congressional Black Caucus. So I want to applaud them for the Congressional Black Caucus political tracker. Okay. Go to the Congressional Black Caucus website, just Google it, Congressional Black Caucus, look up their tracker. This is a new thing that their current leadership has done. It's different and I love it. Something I've been screaming they should do for a while. And they're saying, here are the things that you should be tracking and paying attention to. Guess what? This executive order isn't on there yet. But you should tell them, hey, put this on there. How is this not on your tracker? And then hopefully it'll get out. It might be on before we finish this show. Okay.
I love it.
But the point is that because I've already emailed a couple of people going, how can this not be on your tracker? Not to say that there are some elements of saying public safety is so important and the federal government should be able to facilitate public safety, because if we didn't have that, we wouldn't have had the brown boards of education. We wouldn't have been able to go to schools in the South. Black people wouldn't have been able to if the federal government couldn't send the National Guard to help out with that. So, but when people get into protecting white supremacy, they start doing some really crazy stuff. So you got to be careful right now. And so the Congressional Black Caucus needs to hear from you, as well as your local people. Get involved with your police foundation. Get involved with your NPUs, your neighborhood planning units in Atlanta. The reason I got involved with the police foundation safety issue is because I want to make sure no rights were violated.
Hey, that's why we always, when we get cut, when it comes to politics, we need our people in every party. So, I'm absolutely independent. I don't, generally speaking, just as a general thought, this is again a personal thought, I don't know how us as African Americans can side with either side right now. Again, that's my personal thought, but I absolutely understand the value of having an Emille on the left and a Leo on the right. You got to have people in the community that care about us to make sure that you are monitoring what happens. And what happens when it comes to the emotional side of politics, when people think that it doesn't matter, when you get in that space and you kind of disengage, you now let others tell you what's going to happen to us. And I never want that to happen. Stay engaged. I already got y'all over 10 minutes. I got one more cut. If y'all can give me one more response and we'll close it. All right, y'all. Just wanted to get y'all thoughts because, again, this stuff right here, what we're talking about is important almost regardless of how you feel about the president. But this is something that we have to be concerned about. And we've given y'all some action items that you can take and do something about it with your own power. So let me play this last cut and I'll get both of y'all responses to this.
I wish I was more surprised that Donald Trump is getting away with so much. I saw Donald Trump's first presidency as a stress test for democratic institutions. What we are seeing in this second administration, I think, is that we failed his stress test.
What he's doing would not be possible had we not already seen the erosion of core institutions, whether they're universities or law firms or, an entire political party.
I'm really hoping that both the Harvard's statements will encourage other universities to show a modicum of self-respect.
Any institution that has an endowment that can be enumerated in the billions has no business not standing up to Donald Trump.
Although I don't expect Republicans to be much of an obstacle, I do expect them to at least have a little self-respect and a little dignity as members of Congress, as constitutional officers in their own right. And so when I read stories of members of Congress essentially begging Elon and begging the president not to cut programs that they have funded, I find that just pitiful.
And so in some ways, if he's getting away with a lot of it, it's because we have enabled him to do so.
We don't know exactly where, the ultimate balance will be struck in presidential power between what Trump is trying to do and how the courts might rule, how the Supreme Court might ultimately rule. But at this point, I think what we're seeing is mostly just a reflection of the fact that the Constitution gives the president a lot of power to try to do things.
Trump did win the popular vote in the election. That does give him a patina of democratic legitimacy that he did not have in his first administration.
He has a freedom of action with his base and with Congress that I have never seen any president possess ever in my lifetime. He has bound himself together into the hearts of Republican voters, of grassroots base Republican voters. There's a bond there that I've never seen before. I am not surprised that he's getting away with this at all. Not remotely surprised.
I'll let you start. We're giving you some actions of how you have to be involved. It can't just be simply, I disagree with him, I hate the man, and what are our Congress people doing? It's being laid out pretty consciously on the Politically Conscious Show, in my opinion. Emille, your thoughts. Leo, your thoughts, and we're closing out.
What I love about this point in our history is that we're starting to ask some really hard questions about the character of America. And I'm not under an illusion that America was anything other than whatever it was for the least of us, the people who had the hardest time and the poorest, and the people who had the most, who felt the most oppression from the institutions, law enforcement, the courts, and federal and state and local governments. If it ain't good for them, it ain't good for all of us. And that's the problem. Because if that's true, then it'll take a lot of pressure to get that feeling up the food chain, as it were, so that people with more stuff and more access can start to feel it. But what happens if the people at the top are feeling that kind of pressure? The people at the bottom are feeling it way worse. So the heat is on for all of us. Do we want a constitution that truly treats every person equal under the law or not? Because what we're going to ask and answer in the next several months, perhaps a couple of years, is whether or not America is truly the thing on the piece of paper, or is it what it is in practice? Because the two right now are so far apart, and have been far apart since the end of the Civil War. I say since the end of Reconstruction, honestly. But they've been going like this for a long time. And the question is that the nation we want, where what we say we are and what we truly are different? Or are we going to try to bring something back together? But that's going to be a radical movement, no matter how it goes.
Yep, and I'll say this, Leo, you can close us out. History has shown us with republics, when there's this level of income inequality, which we're experiencing it at its heights again, that those republics fall. So I don't want to shoot out here at extremes and make us fearful, but I am hoping we're all driving people to pay more attention and call the Congressional Black Caucus, like you suggested. Like, take the actions that you can take, even if you're, happy or unhappy with the legislator. That's kind of, I'll keep leaning into that positioning, because why else have this show if we're not going to make our watchers conscious of what they can do as well? Leo, give us a last thought and we're out of here.
I always tell my children, 17 and 19, that their athletic prowess is always one event from being totally destroyed. Ronald Reagan said that freedom is only one generation away from extinction. And we're at that moment, that pivotal moment now, where we can have real freedom, because we've really not ever had it in America, meaning all people, black and white. We all deserve, all people, and all shades in between, okay? But here we are with this moment, as Emille is saying, where we are metamorphosing. And the only way to break out of this cocoon, like a caterpillar that becomes a butterfly and flies beautifully, right, is to actually do the work, to press out your wings, to struggle a little bit, as that caterpillar does when pushing out of that cocoon. And you know what, Americans? You can't sit this one out. So get off of TikTok, get off of social media, get off of your bonbons and you're going out to restaurants and talking about what you're driving and what you're eating. Get in here and make the mountains.
No, thank you. I think it's a great way to close out. If you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. If y'all will, stay in the background just very briefly as I end this stream. See y'all next week. I'll give more notice. Thank y'all for those that popped in. Make sure y'all are sharing these shows, because, again, we are trying to raise the conscious level of the power of the vote, which we've highlighted. I'll keep highlighting it. It's why we're here. We're not here just to talk politics. You can go plenty of places in the media to do that. We are trying to raise the political conscience of our community, regardless of your political affiliation. That's what we're here to do.